Good afternoon and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. We're streaming live from the Boathouse at Confluence Park. My name's Jane Scott, and it's a pleasure and privilege to be the president and CEO of the Columbus Metropolitan Club and to welcome you to our forum today. You know, we're so used to having a couple hundred people in this room that I still haven't quite gotten used to looking at an empty room with a camera, but we're very grateful for the technology that allows us to use live streaming to bring the program to you until you can come back to us. We've made a lot of friends through live streaming, we've discovered, and we know that many of you may not know that the Metropolitan Club was founded by 13 women leaders in 1976 when women weren't always invited into the men's club. They were very determined to make their organization inclusive, and they welcome everybody. We welcome everybody to the Metropolitan Club these days. Today, as a 501c3 nonprofit, we fulfill our mission by connecting people and ideas through community conversation through the support of about 1,500 members who pay their dues and another 100 to 150 corporations and organizations that provide sponsorship, and certainly from donations from people like yourselves. If you're new to CMC, we invite you to take a look at becoming a member. We ask you to visit our website at columbusmetroclub.org for more information, to sign up for our weekly emails, and to get more information about the Metropolitan Club. We're very grateful for those folks who join the Metropolitan Club and pay their dues. We have a new member this week. We'd like to welcome Susan Simpkins. Thank you, Susan, for joining CMC. Many of you also signed up to register online and purchased a virtual seat for today's forum, and we're really grateful for your continued support. Today, CMC's forum is supported by Regionomics, Bill Lafayette, and the Huntington National Bank. And our live stream partners for the special report series are NBC4, NBC4i, WOSU Public Media, PNC, the Tom E. Daly Foundation, MORPSI, the Dispatch Media Group, and the Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center. The discussion and debate around reopening businesses in our economy is in full swing. And we're pleased to welcome two CMC friends who are uniquely positioned to have this discussion today. So we're interested in knowing what's going on in the rooms where it happens. So please welcome President and CEO of the Columbus Partnership, Alex Fischer, and founder and CEO of Cameron Mitchell Restaurants, Cameron Mitchell, and our host, the Emmy Award-winning journalist and host of NBC4, The Spectrum, an attorney and a board member from the Columbus Metropolitan Club, Colleen Marshal. Colleen, we're looking forward to this conversation.
I am too. I have a lot of questions for these two business leaders, and welcome to both of you gentlemen. Alex, I think I'm going to ask for you. Everyone wants a broad overview of what the temperament is, what the feeling is for Ohio businesses now that the government is ready to start this gradual rollout. Are we optimistic?
You know, I think there is a level of optimism, and I think businesses and employees are anxious to get back to a new normal, but also being very, very responsible. So what we're seeing are companies responding very cautiously in stages to think about how to bring employees back into the workplace. We like to say not back to work because it's been amazing, actually, the level of productivity that has continued during this time. And so companies are rolling back into the offices, but they're not rushing back at all. Many companies are thinking about, not coming back into full force until the summertime, making sure that we're being very responsible in doing so. And interestingly, a lot of companies are realizing that this work from home experiment is an experiment that works, and are making plans to think about how to allow more flexibility in the workforce where it makes sense and where they can. So I think we're going to see a lot of shifts long term, but in the short term, I'm sensing over the last couple of weeks in particular a lot more optimism.
It is interesting, and I've heard from businesses that say work from home works. You know where work from home doesn't work? In the hospitality industry. And Cameron Mitchell, I am sure you are seeing, you were one of the restaurant owners who made the decision fairly early on that we have to shut down. This has to be a shutdown. In the interest of full disclosure, my daughter-in-law works for you. My daughter used to work from you. And I'm getting a lot of questions from their friends who still work for you. And the big question I want to start with is, when do we come back? They want to know, and how do we come back?
Well, we just opened up about a quarter of our restaurants last night to begin the process of, for carry-out and delivery and curbside pickup and so forth, to begin the reopening process. That's we want to work out those kinks and get that all squared away prior to opening. We'll find out from the governor said he'll announce on Thursday. I think the date and the guidelines that they've adopted, the state's adopted for restaurants to reopen. And we think that's going to be 2 weeks from today, somewhere in that ballpark. It's going to be sooner than later, we know that. And we're anxious to get going. And we think it'll probably be at 50% seating capacity, but those rules are yet to be defined for us. But we'll adapt to whatever we have. But we're anxious to get back to work and anxious to get our restaurants back open, obviously.
And Alex, the hospitality sector, it's not just restaurants, but hotels, entertainment. We've focused our short north area, for example, on that. What sectors are you seeing are going to have the greatest problem getting back up to speed and getting the economy churning again?
You know, look, very few are immune from this, incredible challenge, unprecedented in society across the world in anybody's lifetime. And so this is going to be a slow return. This economy is not coming back quickly because it's going to require across a hospitality industry that will look very differently than the automotive industry that's very big in Columbus. Our healthcare systems, clearly have been operating, but operating in different ways and at different levels. Our retailers, and Columbus is a big headquartered operation for retail companies, are coming back at different paces. And so what we're going to see are different stages and threading of different companies coming back into the economy. And what that's going to mean from a macro level is going to be, what we hope to be steady growth coming back, but it's going to be slow growth and it's going to require a lot of perseverance. I mean, we're going to leave, hopefully, and we're all cautiously optimistic that we don't have a double dip as it relates to the health crisis and that we can continue to move out of the health crisis. But this is going to then enter a sustained economic situation that's going to take quite some time to come back from. But Columbus is a resilient community in its diversification in Ohio, and we feel like, as we've seen in other downturns economically, that Columbus will likely lead Ohio. We have a special responsibility from that standpoint, and the diversity of our economy will help us come back quicker than many others.
There is talk of a possible massive recession out of all of this, and we are seeing some local businesses saying, we're not just furloughing, we are now in the position that we need to permanently eliminate positions. The Columbus Zoo did it just earlier this week. 30 positions gone permanently, some of them executive positions, a number of them. Do you anticipate that we're going to see downsizing and therefore an even greater impact on the economy?
Well, look, we're seeing it now. The reality is statewide we're pushing nearly 20% unemployment. I think the numbers that haven't come out yet this week, but have been pushing 18%. Here in the Columbus region and for Franklin County, it's 12.5% unemployment. And we also know that those numbers don't hit everybody the same. I mean, we have real disparity between rural and urban areas. We've got some rural counties in central Ohio that are now pushing 30% unemployment with manufacturing declines. And we know the African-American communities are being hit especially hard. And so this is going to be a very complicated and severe economic situation to come out of, which is one of the ways we think about it. What I see are leaders thinking about the very short term, What's it mean to get out of this health crisis? They're thinking about the midterm. How are we going to do everything we can to be back to some semblance of normal into the summer time frame for the rest of the year? But increasingly, we're also looking across the long term to say, what's it going to take to rebuild and recover? How are we going to get back to a growth agenda in Columbus? And it's against all three of those timescales that I'm seeing leaders in both public and private sector looking at and making plans for.
You know, Cameron, one of the questions that I got from friends of children is that right now, let's say a waitress who works for Cameron Mitchell Restaurants is on unemployment. You have generously covered their health care through June. They got some bonuses out of the program that you had for the Employee Foundation. They're also getting unemployment and that $600 a week bonus from the federal government. If they go back to work at a downsized capacity with limited number of people in the restaurant, there's a chance they're going to be making far less money when they go back to work. Are you concerned about that? What's the incentive to come back to work?
Yeah, it's a great question, Colleen. We're definitely facing that today. I know a number of other businesses are also. People are making more money staying home than they are coming back to work. But that window, provided the $600 from the government does indeed run out on July 25th, that window will begin to close. And people will have to make a decision here shortly, especially as we reopen, whether they're going to risk not having a job post that shutdown of the government plan or going to get back with us. We do know our communities have been fabulous to us and within the restaurant industry, and a lot of sympathy tips out there right now and so forth. So I think people are going to do just fine when they get back. But it's clearly that plus the safety issue are two issues that we're dealing with as we're trying to regain our workforce. We had 4,500 associates prior to this, and we were struggling to get 8 or 10 to open up restaurants that we had this week opening. And now if we're faced with opening again in 2 weeks, 50% of our dining rooms, we're going to face some more issues. But that clock is running out, and eventually I think come June, they're going to realize that they need to get back to work.
So if you reopen at 50% capacity, tell me what this looks like. Do you call back 50% of your people? Will people be sitting every other table? How do you, you know, I'm used to seeing at bars people lining up waiting for drinks while they're waiting for their table. How does it physically look when you come into a Cameron Mitchell restaurant?
Well, again, yet to be determined whether they're going to actually make us take tables out or not seat, tables. My suggestion to the governor was just seat every other table or keep the 6-foot distancing through seating, but keeping the dining rooms the same. So it'd be no different in that respect coming into a restaurant later on a Tuesday night or earlier in the evening with it not being completely full. It should hopefully feel that same way. I'm sure they're not going to allow seating at the bar probably, so it'll be stand up, maybe get no service, but just service bar. The other thing that's somewhat advantageous, especially for our restaurants in the north here, is that it's patio season. So, you might have a 140-seat restaurant that is now a 180-seat restaurant because we were able to open the patio. So if we maintain that 50% occupancy, that number's grown. So it's a little bit of a break in it timing-wise for us. As far as people coming back, we'll see what happens. We know we're going to lose some people to the industry. We know, and we use our pecking order as our full-time associates to come back, and we may not have those part-time positions available for people that we had before. So we'll figure it out. But I think demand and supply will meet right in the middle somewhere. We'll find an equilibrium with our people and our needs.
One of the other questions I got from one of your employees is, we are a face-to-face hospitality business. We take great pride in welcoming people, talking to them, getting close to the table. How are you going to protect the diners and the waiters and still have that feel of hospitality and welcome?
Well, first of all, we pride ourselves in leading the industry in terms of sanitation and safety protocols. Our safety of our people and our guests and health of our guests have always been a paramount to us. We have our restaurants inspected by the health department 3 or 4 times a year, and we have an outside firm inspect them an additional 3 or 4 times a year to make sure, and we measure that constantly, make sure we're doing the right job. So we've issued new safety and sanitation protocols that we think are matched by the industry or unparalleled, even above what the industry standards and the governor's standards are going to be. But ultimately, that's been the problem. Guests are not going to wear masks in the restaurants. You're eating and drinking in the restaurant. You can't wear a mask. Now, our people, we've been wearing masks and ensuring that we're not spreading the virus, and we'll make sure our people are healthy and temperature checked every day, and the restaurant's completely clean and sanitized. We'll, single-use menus, single bread service. I mean, there's a plethora of things that we're doing to keep our guests safe and our people safe. But ultimately, you may not have that server that's leaning into the table as much and so close to you, and there'll be a little more distancing. But I think it'll be a fairly safe environment, and we're going to go as far as we can, but still trying to maintain hospitality and maintain that warm feeling within the restaurant.
Alex, we know that we are watching big box stores stay open. Walmarts are open, the Targets are open because they have groceries that are essential, as well as big stores, Kroger, Giant Eagle. They'll survive this. There's concern about the smaller businesses that are, in a lot of ways, the backbone of the Central Ohio economy. Small restaurants that aren't like Cameron Mitchell, but also mom and pop grocery stores or small retail outlets. Are you concerned that we're going to just see a lot of people who might have just been getting their businesses off the ground that simply can't sustain themselves?
I am, but I'm also optimistic. I think this is an opportunity where Columbus can come together and really focus in our government and big company purchasing power for small businesses to encourage buying local, to do everything that we can to support our neighbor during this challenging time. And it's going to be important that we put a concentrated effort about how we think about those small businesses. The states had some amazing programs. The federal government support through its PPP loan program is really been reaching small businesses of all type. But it's going to take an intentional effort. And I actually think that's something that Columbus can do better than most, because I have a belief that we're organized better than so many to really put a focus on those companies that have the greatest need in doing everything that we can to support them, starting with everybody that's watching this, continuing to look for the opportunities to buy local, look for the opportunities to support the mom and pop shop in every purchase that you're making and every move that you're making. Make that a conscious decision. And if we can do that as an entire community, we can help those that are having some of the most severe challenges.
You mentioned PPE, and there has certainly been support, those small business loans coming from the federal government. Is the government on the federal and state level doing everything you would like them to do at this point?
It's challenging. If you look to the last recession and the amount of federal stimulus that came in the 2008 and 9 time frame, we've already seen 4 times that amount of stimulus coming from the federal government. So at some level, I think governments acted quickly, not always perfectly, and now they're going back and working on rules. There are things I would have preferred to have seen differently. I would have preferred to see some preference to minority-owned firms as they rolled out their rules, as one example. But with that said, I think it's been pretty remarkable that things have stabilized as much as they have, showing the resilience of our American economy. But it also, shows the connectedness to the world that we have and everything that we do. And so I think we've got a long way to go, but I think the initial response on that aspect has been good. I also think that this has emphasized the importance of state and local government. I think on the health side of things, it's really been the cities and state governments that are shining through this moment, our own mayor and our own governor included. And I think they'll be a trend moving forward of more dominance of decision-making at the state and local level, not relying on the federal government where, I think many people have been frustrated by the erratic decision-making and lack of consistency that's come out of Washington.
People have been frustrated and confused. Who do you believe? Now there are all these conspiracy theorists all over the internet that hospitals are lying about who's dying and what the cause of death was or what the source is of the virus. A lot of the recovery is going to be wrapped around the psyche,
So
people being confident in coming back.
We surveyed Columbus Partnership employees of partnership companies, and had 10,000 employees. And there was a common trend that you ask them, who do they trust? They trusted their local news, not the national news. They trusted their mayor and their governor. They trusted their CEOs and their bosses for information. I think it does get to the psyche. I think this psyche of coming back is really important. Every one of our CEOs, first and foremost, is worried about their employees' safety and health, not about their finances of the company. And they're worried about their mental health and their family health in terms of how everybody navigates this. And it's not going to be, as the governor says, as simple as flipping a light switch. This is going to be a dimmer switch, and people are going to have to get accustomed to feeling comfortable, not only comfortable in their physical safety, but just in the emotions that go with, this very unusual time that we've had to live through.
One of the questions that I got from a bartender is, we are in a social business. We are social people. We talk all of the time. All of a sudden, we're all isolated and alone. Cameron, they want to know, are you worried about the psychological well-being of the people who work for you?
Oh, absolutely. We have, our part of our company culture and values is our associates come first. It's been our bedrock principle since day one. And I have weekly Zoom meetings with all different facets of leadership within our company, multiple calls every week to share with them very openly what we're doing and where we're going. And then our associates have their own chat rooms and their Zoom meetings and happy hours. And I think, they're still connecting very well. We have our associate newsletter that goes out. Our culture and values has been alive and well through this whole thing. And a lot of people thought that might go out the window, but in actuality, that's where it's even been strengthened. So I think people, they are social animals and they want to get back. And I think people realize today, this has got to end. We cannot stay home for much longer. I know my wife is the same way. Everybody's feeling that pressure to get out but do it safely. And so I think it's going to come together here, but it's going to take, as Alex said, a long haul. We look at it exactly the same way, the short term, midterm, and long term. And short term was survival and to get open, and we're working through that process. Second term is really to evaluate where we are and our profitability and hopefully have some sense of profitability. And the third is just to stay. We think this is going to be all the way through 21. And it's going to be a long time recovery, and we want to just stay viable through that time. So it's going to be challenging.
It's also going to be a challenge to get people confident enough. Everyone says, I want to get out. I'm so tired of being in the house. But some polls show they're afraid to go into a restaurant. How do you market against that fear and make people realize we're going to keep you safe if you come into a restaurant?
Yeah, I don't know that we can market against that fear. We will do everything we can all through our website and our front doors and everything in the evidence that people will see while they're in our restaurants, our care and concern we're taking. But ultimately, it's going to be their decision. And ultimately, as the public becomes more and more comfortable, that's when our dining rooms will grow and people will be more and more comfortable going out. So to a certain extent, that's out of our control. But we'll do whatever we can to make sure our public and our guests feel safe within our restaurants.
And on that topic of marketing, Alex, we're seeing all of these television commercials with sad piano music and messages of togetherness, and companies trying to find a new way to present themselves to the public that we're with you, we're going through this with you. Are those the kinds of messages that big businesses are going to have to be sending out for, as Cameron said, for another year? If we continue doing this, it's almost depressing.
You know, look, I think you can't remake yourself. You know, we're the same people, we're the same city, we're the same company today that we were in January. And that was a great city, a great momentum. And we will be and are continuing to be today. And companies and people have to adapt. And you can think about how to improve. And so I think everybody, you know, uses this moment in time to say, how do we get better? There's a saying of, let's get back to the new normal. I actually hope we get back to a better new normal, because I think through this process there's a lot of things that we as a community can address and deal with more aggressively. But fundamentally, I don't think we change who we are. I don't think companies change. We have great employers who, you know, were putting the safety of their employees first in January, and they're continuing to do that now. Cameron's statement of philosophies in his business and how they operate didn't magically change overnight as a part of this. At some level, what we're doing is having a gut check and going back to the foundational bedrocks of what built our companies, what built our communities, what built this great city and state. If we'll stay grounded to those fundamentals, that is what will guide us through this. And allow us actually to get better in the process.
Are we?
I would
go ahead.
add one more thing, Colleen, that, you know, to a certain extent, I feel more connected now than ever. You know, through this whole thing, the amount of letters we've received from our associates and our guests, and the support and the texts and emails and all the camaraderie I've had with my fellow restaurateurs around the state as advocating for our industry, and with our national restaurateurs, and connectivity to our government and to our congressional leaders, and all through this. So I think that's, you know, I've learned a long time there's silver linings and everything, and I think, yes, we may not have that physical connectivity, but I sure think we have some spiritual connectivity. It's whether it's even just walking down the street in your neighborhood. You know, you say hi to every single person that walks by now, where that may not have happened before this. So I think there's a lot of positive that will come out of this at the end of the day.
And I think we've seen the same in the corporate community. Cameron and I were on a video chat last night with 60 fellow CEO leaders around Columbus, sharing best practices, talking about what one another are doing, learning from each other. And that's what we have always done day in and day out. It's been more intense. It's been more frequent. It's been more intentional. And candidly, I'd say it's been more genuine. Yeah. But it's more genuine because it's built on a foundation of trust that we all have with one another. I think the same holds true with our mayor and with our governor. None of us would agree with every single decision that they've made, but don't we all agree that Columbus and Ohio have shown very proudly during this crisis compared to a lot of other places? And I think that those are, you know, foundational bedrocks that we have to keep reaching back to, building on trust, building on collaboration, always learning from one another, and at the end of the day, always having the resolve that we will get through this.
I know CEOs around the country have taken pay cuts, have offered to have management level pay reductions, trying to hold on to the employees and give them the support that they need. Are we seeing a lot of that in Ohio? Are there pay cuts? Are there employees being asked to take cuts?
I don't know, number one, I don't know a company in Columbus whose executives, both their CEOs and their senior executives, haven't taken very significant pay reductions. And they're doing everything they can at the top of the organizations to try to help the breadth of the organizations. And so dramatic cost savings, payroll reductions, everybody is trying. The best companies that are seeing are taking the attitude, we have to do what we can do to get to the other side of this. Because at the end of the day, The best company is going to be a company that's in business and that is surviving. And so the instinct is to be in survival mode, to do everything that you can, and then to think about, how you get back into thriving mode at a later point in time.
Will that be an expectation for your managers, maybe a pay reduction?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think companies are handling it, and, what I've seen is a couple different flavors. Our motto is our associates come first, and so we want to bring, and particularly our home office and our managers, we want to bring all of our managers back. So instead of selectively saying, hey, we're going to eliminate a third of our workforce, or we're going to go through and grade each person, and we're going to, let the bottom third go, or whatever. We've taken the tact, is one of my favorite sayings is we'll get there together. I've been saying that for 25 years now, and so I tell our team we're going to get through this together, and our goal is to bring back essentially 100% of our workforce. So we've asked our people to take an 80 or 20% reduction in salary when they do come back, and also to a 4-day work week, from a 5-day work week to a 4-day work week. And so we think we can accomplish that with the slower volume of the restaurants and not be too taxing on our people. But that way we're able to bring everybody back in the office, everybody back in our restaurant teams, and hopefully all of our full-time associates back as we can.
You have to plan now for probably more takeout, as well as a reduction in the number of people coming into the restaurant, a slight reduction in the workforce. What about your supply chain? How are you going to gear up for restaurants have food that perishes?
Yeah.
How do you get ready for the supply chain for all of this?
Well, I think you've seen in the news already, there's been a number of, plants, processing plants that have been closed down to the coronavirus and in the close proximity of those workers. I firmly believe those plants will come back. I know the president ordered them, but I know they'll come back. And they'll be back with the full PPE and safety precautions and social distancing that needs to be in there. So that we'll get past that. And you've seen, milk producers dumping milk because the schools are closed. They don't have, my dairy purveyor, I went throughout, I don't know how many tens of thousands of the 8-ounce pints of milk, they couldn't use or couldn't give away. So those things were happening. So that supply chain, once these restaurants open up, I think it's going to do a great job to help pull that supply chain all the way through and get our farmers back and get everybody back onto some regular, albeit might be limited production, but regular production and so forth. But right now, when one piece of that chain gets broken, the whole thing tends to break down. And so I think we'll see. I just talked with our purchasing specialists here today. We think that as far as food, that the next 6 weeks are still going to be a little choppy. You might see weakness in the grocery stores and higher prices and so forth. But ultimately, that supply chain will be worked out, and then ultimately we'll have lower wholesale food prices across the board as demand levels out, but at a lower demand.
One of the other questions I had for you is you are going to have new sanitation probably protocols when you're switching tables. How do you manage the time that it'll take for that? Are you going to do things like disposable menus or menus that can be sanitized between each person?
Correct. I mean, every step of the process, there might not be a salt and pepper shaker on the table, or there might only upon request. Bread service, there'll be no more of a community bread basket, where you're going to get an individual bread service per se. Disposable menus, all the limiting the touch environments, the restrooms cleaned, almost every single time. I mean, just out there, the doors, and sanitation stations within the restaurants for guests to sanitize their hands anytime they want, and the protocols. And the other thing is, and those tables will be, tabletops will have to be sanitized, and the booths and everything completely as they get turned. So there's a lot to be done on that. But fortunately, we're entrepreneurs, and fortunately, the restaurant people out there in this industry are pretty rugged folks, and they've had to make do with many different changes along the way in their business, and they're going to continue to adapt. And I'm confident we as an industry will adapt to this.
You mentioned entrepreneurs. Strangely, COVID-19 has inspired some businesses. There is now in Cleveland a woman who is making masks and selling them in a vending machine. There are people who have come up with new ways, distilleries, new ways to create sanitizers. What are you seeing, Alex, in the creative minds of people in Ohio as a result of COVID-19?
You know, it's across the board. So, you know, I saw our Smart Columbus team create the Can't Stop Columbus effort that's doing any number of grassroots movements that are singing, taking musical acts out to sing to elderly that are inbound, and, you know, any number of grassroots kind of movements. You're seeing big companies and individuals figuring out the PPE issue. I mean, think of what our hometown Battelle has done on the national stage and how proud we all are of them. But I can tell you about the lady Gay who made my, you know, OSU mask for me, and, you know, across the board, everybody is pitching in to do their part. And, you know, that's what we're seeing. I talked to a good friend of mine, Mike Triplett, yesterday, who, you know, announced that they're launching a new biotechnology company using technology out of Nationwide Children's Hospital and the Ohio State University. You know, if you look back in history, these big moments in time, you know, coming out of World War II was perhaps some of the greatest innovation that our country had ever seen. I've got to believe that the decade ahead of us may be one of the most exciting decades of innovation and transformation, thinking about doing business differently, society differently. You know, we've talked about telemedicine for a long, long time. Now we're practicing it. We know it works. We know reimbursements can work. And I think there are going to be some very significant shifts. We can be scared of those shifts, or we can embrace them. I think there will be entrepreneurs all over the world that are embracing and looking for the opportunities and growing our next economy into the future.
The one thing that I thought restaurants will do is something that you've done at a number of yours, and you mentioned it, outside dining. Mm-hmm. I think there are going to be restaurants that have never done it before now in Columbus, mm-hmm. don't you think, that are looking for ways to do that?
Oh, yeah. There's going to be innovation all over the place, and you know, I tell our people all the time, don't, you know, let's just try it. We don't know. There is no right answer. So we're kind of going in a lot of different directions to see, and I don't want to hamper any sort of creativity within our organization, because you never know where you're going to stumble on. This is going to be the next great thing, and so we're looking at a total open mind like that. And you know, I tell my son the same thing, who I was supposed to go to New York for college graduation next week, and it's not happening, but he's trying to find a job and having a very difficult time. But I said, listen, this next 10 years it's a wild open, wild west out there. There's going to be new businesses, new ventures, new opportunities come through. And this could be the best thing that ever happened to you. Just got to keep an open mind to it, and we'll see what happens.
I feel, though, for people entering the workforce right now, in the same way that I did back in 2008. Mm-hmm. I know we're about to get to audience questions, but I do want to throw this out to both of you. Can you imagine that this would be a difficult hiring year for young people? No, who's going to be expanding and hiring?
Yeah, Charlie Mitchell and Ethan Fischer, our sons, are the same age, and they're graduating college. And look, they'll find their footing. Mm-hmm. This economy is coming back. There are many bright days ahead. Economic development is still a war on talent. We actually have had projects in Columbus this week. We see Amazon moving forward on a major new data center in our community. We see the tech community continuing to be very, very resilient, and growing. And unfortunately, there are going to be some losers through all of this, but there are also going to be some great new opportunities. And I think actually it's not Cameron or I or you, Colleen, that have the greatest future ahead of them. I think it's our kids, because they're going to be the ones that are resilient, that get through this, and that are creative to drive things forward. So, yeah, I think there are going to be some short-term challenges for everybody, but I think all of our kids have a really bright future.
And I see you nodding in agreement on that.
Oh,
Alex is basically saying we are old.
we are.
Jane has some questions. Our virtual audience has been sending questions in, so let's hear some of them.
And wow, have they. I have a lot of questions, so I'll try to go through them fast. Siddiqa White asks, how might the movement to work at home affect the brick and mortar? I'm assuming she means commercial real estate.
You know, look, I think it's a big shift. We know we have companies now are realizing that productivity did not decline as certain employees were working from home. And I think we'll see many companies bringing employees back, but I think it will come with increased flexibility. I think it changes what offices look like into the future. I think the office developers who are creative about placemaking will be the developers who create the unique spaces of the future. But look, it's not going to look like, just like offices look differently from where they were 10 or 15 years ago, they're going to look very differently moving forward, and there'll be people that take advantage of that.
Alex Slaymaker asks, could a portion of High Street be closed in the short north so more restaurants could accommodate outdoor seating?
I think it's a great idea.
I do too.
You know, and talking about that a little bit on High Street downtown to create more of a boulevard feel, but I think we could do that. I definitely think we could do that, if not permanently, but maybe even in the short term, or, you know, one of my restaurants in Colorado does the exact same thing. They close the street for a week and it just becomes this outdoor, you know, festival. The restaurants all throw seats out there on the street, and it's great. It's a huge party. It's a great time.
You know, that brings up a question about the short north. If you, in the summertime, are walking through those streets, they are crowded. There are a lot of people who like to spend time not just going to the restaurants and shops, but strolling and sightseeing. Do you imagine there are going to have to be controls on the number of people who can be on the sidewalks there? And how would that impact all of your restaurants in the short north?
Yeah, I don't know how you do that. I can't see that unless we get to an extreme duress situation. It's either going to be open or it's going to be closed.
And are you going to require people to have masks on when they come in? How do you
No, we're going to follow the lead of the governor and the state requirements. You know, we require masks of all of our people. We would hope people wear masks. I'll wear masks if I go into a retail establishment, et cetera, but not everybody's going to be required to do that. And we don't feel like we're in the position to police that. So it's going to be up to our guests to make that decision.
There are a lot of similar questions, so I'm going to try to paraphrase a few. You've already addressed some of this, but Bill Lafayette from Regionomics, as a higher risk household, we remain very hesitant about venturing out, and I have seen polls suggesting that we are not alone. Assuming that takeout remains a widely available option, at what capacity do restaurants become profitable? So I guess he's looking ahead at, is takeout going to become part of the new model for restaurants permanently?
Oh, yeah. We think it's a permanent piece going forward. And, you know, we've done some modeling that we think for ourselves that if we can do 50% in dining sales, another 20% with carryout, and achieve that 75% threshold, we hope to make a little bit of profit. And we have to. I tell our teams now we have to make profit, because if we don't make profit, first of all, you make loss, you can't survive. But secondly, we have bank debt to service and principal and interest payments, and we need to make a profit so we can service that debt, or we're going to find ourselves in a very difficult position downrange. So that's the kind of the modeling that we think can work. But if you fall much further below that, and it's, I think then we're talking real problems for the restaurant industry as a whole.
Do you see yourself changing the hours so that you're encouraging people to maybe make reservations earlier or later than they otherwise might have, kind of an expansion of the dining room hours so that you can make up some of that loss of having us all there at once?
Right. I think that gets back to the public comfort we've been discussing, and the demand and the state regulations. You know, example being if demand, people feeling more and more comfortable going out, but state regulations are still at limited seating capacity. In the summertime, we might see expanded dining hours where people wouldn't be eating at 9 o'clock. They might be eating at 9 o'clock now. So we hope that's a piece of the new reality, but we'll see.
The Spanish model. Dinner doesn't start
Yeah,
till 9.
right.
Yeah.
We
The
Americans go to bed early.
The other part of Bill's question, you know, is something that is just common sense. We know by the data that this disease, you know, affects the elderly and the vulnerable, you know, harder. And then, therefore, we need to be smart. We need to encourage our elderly family and friends to be more precautious, to be more cautious, to stay in. We then have a responsibility to do the things that we need to do by wearing masks and being safe so that we don't spread it to, you know, to them. So I think we've got to have these common sense kinds of conversations with people about being responsible, doing the right thing, and especially protecting those who are the most vulnerable among us.
Stephanie Wilson from Capital University, in emphasizing the need to carefully manage reopening businesses, Mayor Ginther has shared that Cameron Mitchell can only afford to reopen his restaurants once. Will Mr. Mitchell please explain the reasoning behind this comment?
Sure. So, first of all, and I don't know if this is a fair analogy, but I say, you know, if you own a barber shop, or, you know, you kind of come in the next morning and turn the lights on and your stylist come in, and there you go. Well, we have food. You know, we had a tremendous amount of food go to waste. We are a cash business, so you use that cash that comes in to pay your bills. When that cash doesn't, because the bills are due over time, that cash doesn't come in, you don't have the money to pay those bills. So, and it takes time to reopen our restaurants with labor. So we have a couple weeks of expenses and labor in there that we have no revenue attached to. So in our case, it's costing us millions and millions and millions of dollars to reopen our company. And we don't have, you know, the money. We didn't have the money to do that to start with. If it wasn't for the PPP, the PPP saved us and allowed us to have some of the money, not even all of it, but a big chunk of it. And if we have to go through this again, it's just going to be awful, and I'm not sure how the government's going to respond or whatever, but it's, I hope, as we're sure sitting here, that we never have to go through that again.
Yeah, us too. Jennifer Price asks, do you think leaving the mask policy up to each restaurant, and I'll add each business, will slow the return to the restaurants and businesses?
You mean mandatory mask you have to wear to the business will slow the return?
Well, restaurants not having mandatory policy, will it slow people to return to restaurants? Would you discourage them from going out
Well,
into
look, for all
business?
businesses, I think the governor's been very direct. He hasn't mandated it. He said these are important. You know, we should all be wearing these every chance and moment that we have when we're in the public, when we're in retail operations. You know, if you go to the grocery store, you should put them on. You know, they're going to be required in places of business, and that's a good thing. We have to respect that, we have to honor it, and we have to do it. And we have to encourage others, and we shouldn't make any apologies about it. And on the one hand, respect it's everybody, every customer, every citizen's choice, but we need the choices to be the right one, and we've got to be forceful in our encouragement that everybody wear masks and maintain social distancing.
I think there's a little bit of social shaming going on. I was at a business the other day. I had to stop and get a prescription, and everyone in the store, everyone in the pharmacy had masks on, and someone walked in and didn't have one, and they kind of took a step back, like, you know,
think
maybe
we'll
I
see
shouldn't
that.
go in.
Let's
Maybe
hold
I
each
shouldn't
other
go in.
accountable.
Yeah.
Yeah. James Moore asks, will there be concerts this summer? And if so, how will they operate? The arts are so important to our community.
You know, I saw a virtual concert the other night, and so, yeah, I think there'll be concerts. I'm not sure that they're going to pack 25,000 people into the Schottenstein Center anytime soon. But I think people will be creative and look for the opportunities to listen to music, perform the arts, and do it in responsible ways. And so I actually think you can do both. I think the way that we do those, though, is going to be very different, certainly this summertime, but it doesn't mean that we can't be creative.
Before I let you go, I know we're nearly out of time, but Cameron, one of the questions I had from someone was, ask Cameron to describe what he envisions the experience for a diner to be like coming into a restaurant in this new environment. What will we see? How will the experience feel? What do you want diners to get out of a post-coronavirus visit to one of your restaurants?
Well, that's a good question. I think I've kind of addressed it already. We want our guests to feel as normal and as natural as possible. So I think one is they're going to feel, subliminally or just directly, they see you on the door, but they're going to know the sanitation practices. They're going to see our staff in masks and gloves and so forth. So they're going to feel that. That's probably the most visible thing that's different. They're going to see it in, might be in the menus, might be a little more limited per se. Temporary menus, not temporary, but one single-use menus. They're the tabletop itself or so forth. But hopefully the idea is that once they're seated and in the restaurant and enjoying the experience, they're still enjoying the great hospitality experience that our guests have come to know and trust from us. And so that's our goal.
And Alex, one final question for you. What is your message to not just the CEOs and the business community, but to all of us about your vision of the economy?
Well, look, over the last decade, Columbus led the country in economic growth. And this has been one of the biggest speed bumps in the world's economy in history. We will recover. And as we recover, if we're smart, if we're aggressive, if we're not afraid, but if we're responsible, we will recover. We'll recover quicker, and we'll return to the glory days of Columbus. We have all the fundamentals. We have all the reasons to believe that we can continue the great economic renaissance that we've had. And certainly, this is a challenge. How we deal with this challenge will define how quickly and robustly that we come back. And I'm very bullish on Columbus leading Ohio back to the glory days and back to a point in time in which we're leading the country in economic growth and prosperity. And if that's optimistic, you're damn right it is. I'm an optimistic person. I believe in this city. I believe in our state. And I believe in all the citizens. We're doing everything right. Let's keep doing it. We'll persevere this together. We'll stick together. And by doing so, we'll rebound very, very quickly.
Thank you both.
What great words come out of this forum today. Trust, collaboration, resolve. The decade could be the most transformational, perhaps, in our whole century. Steady growth, slow growth, persistence, perseverance, resilience, optimism. All great things for all of us to take home today. We look forward to seeing you next week, too, for our forum, Nonprofits, Frontline Response, where we'll be featuring Lisa Cordes, President and CEO of the United Way of Central Ohio, and Chuck Gehring, who's President and CEO of Life Care Alliance. Today, we're grateful for the support from Regionomics and Huntington National Bank, and for our live stream partners this week and for the weeks in the past and the weeks to come, NBC4, NBC4i, WSU Public Media, PNC, Tommy Daly Foundation, MORPSI, the Dispatch Media Group, and Ohio State University Wexner Medical Center. We're very grateful for our speakers, Alex Fischer, Cameron Mitchell, and Colleen Marshal, and we hope to see many of you live and in person at a Columbus Metropolitan Club Forum sometime this summer, and a special thanks to those of you who purchased virtual seats for today's forum. We're very, very grateful. We all pray that we all come through this great and that our economy and our community will rebound as we've heard today. In the meantime, be well, stay safe, and we look forward to seeing you again.